What's up guys, I'm Zach and welcome back to Workshop Edits and welcome to episode 7 of my tiny office build series in my backyard. In today's episode, we're going to be tackling everything drywall mudding, drywall finishing, taping, painting, detailing. I'll just say up front, this was a massive amount of work, very time consuming, but this was my building. I was incredibly detailed and focused on making everything look as perfect as possible. It required a lot of research, some special materials. So hopefully those who are interested in doing their own drywalling and mudding, who are brand new to the skill, much like I was, learn something along the way. Let's go ahead and get started.
Sorry if it's a little echoey in here, but now that all the drywalling is done, I'm going to do two things. The first thing is tackle these gaps up here, which is something that has been on my mind for a while, but I left all of the research until basically right now. I knew from the get-go there was no way I was going to be able to get these gaps perfect between the drywall and the shiplap roof that I have. And the reason that it's been on my mind is drywall can absorb moisture, but I think for the most part, like, it doesn't expand nearly as much as the wood that it might touch. So this gap is gonna have different amounts of movement involved with it. My initial thought was just to use something like big stretch caulk that could just span that gap. To be totally honest, that still might be a good viable solution. And I think that's what I plan to do with these gaps. They're a lot smaller in terms of the actual width of the gap, and they're a lot smaller in terms of the distance between the wood and the drywall. And overall, you don't have to worry about movement that much when your gaps get that small. But there's a product out there that I found, and it was so hard to find in Southern California. It didn't exist within 100 miles of me at any of the big box stores. But the smaller mom and pop stores, they've got it, and they got it for cheaper. So let me show you what it is. So this product is called Trimtex Peel Away L-Bead, and it comes in 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch depending on what thickness you are using for drywall. The way it works, it just seems awesome, it's perfect, is it essentially creates a sharp edge for you. So what you'll do, and I'll take you up there actually. I already cut this piece to length. So this stuff is made out of vinyl, so it cuts easily with just a pair of snips if you have them, or even scissors, I would guess. You can obviously use a miter saw if you want things to be really quick repeat, and I might actually do that just because I have quite a few of these. But the way it works is this piece will go, make sure you guys can see this properly, all the way up here against this top edge and create a nice sealed off straight joint between the top of the plywood, or the top of the drywall, and whatever surface it's coming into contact with. I found a bunch of different DIY articles and professional articles that recommended this specifically for drywall to wooden exposed beams to make it have that nice clean look. So what you'll do is you'll use a spray adhesive. There's a very specific one that they make for this that's, I guess, for probably vinyl plastic. They literally don't sell it in California, and it doesn't feel like you specifically need that. What you really need is just anything that is a multi-purpose spray adhesive that can stick with plastics and other materials. So I just bought the regular 3M77 spray. So you can spray it on the back of the piece here, then let it tack up for 10 seconds, hold it in place nicely. And if you want to then supplement that with staples or little nails to really secure it in place, you can, but you don't have to. You then can apply your coats of mud, 2 or 3, and sand in between, both onto right here, and then, smooth that out onto your drywall. Then you can wait till you paint. So you've gone through sticking it on, your coats of drywall and sanding and painting, and then there's a little tiny tab up here that you can peel away, and it gives you this really nice clean edge, all while protecting the surface that you are going into, and then it just gives you a nice clean joint. Now, in my case, because there's a slope in the roof, and it's probably the case for a lot of people, there's gonna end up being a 1/4 inch gap. That I'm just gonna fill with either regular interior paintable white caulk or big stretch caulk, because I'll have this nice joint on all of these to kind of represent the drywall to wood transition, and then just seal off that gap entirely. These things are super cheap. They come in 10-foot sections. They are $3. I can't imagine doing this without these, and I'm so glad I was able to find them. So I cut this one to length, which is gonna go all the way up here. I'm gonna just do a test off camera to make sure I get the process right, and then I'll do one on camera just to like make sure I know what I'm doing and I'm showing the proper installation of it. All right, so that was literally as easy as could possibly be, so let me show you how it works. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna measure this distance, which is just a little over 10.5. So here's the L strip, comes in a big section, so I'm just gonna take that measurement. Got my $7 snips from Harbor Freight. Just gonna make a snip a little over 10.5, a little over 10.5, and then you can see it just cuts just as easily as any vinyl product, thin vinyl product you might have. So there you go. So you got to make sure that you're obviously putting it on correctly. The peel away strip is the smaller end on the front here. So you want to make sure you're putting your glue on the back. So let's do that. Backside. Just going to do one pass. Just 2 clean passes. So I've been giving it like 15 to 20 seconds to sort of gunk up and get set in. And then let's take you up to the piece. I'm going to show you how easy it is. I'm literally going to do it one-handed. So backside. Piece goes up there, get it up to the top where it needs to go, and then just gonna hold it in place, let the glue set for like, 10, 15 seconds, just kind of push it in its different places. It's a little bit tricky, my hand's not big enough to span all of it, but I think it's gonna be fine. Super easy. So I already got 2 of them done. It's just going so fast, it's so easy. Drywalling is so easy. I just knocked out the other side too, and you can see I actually ended up putting them, these gaps, for whatever reason. Let me see if I can zoom in. These gaps were just a lot bigger. I don't know, it's really hard to like score these around posts, so I ended up using these underneath them. It's not necessarily on the other side, but it came out really, really good. That Trimtex LB tearaway, like super easy to work with, and it's hiding all of my mistakes, which is awesome. So I'm ready to start mudding, and I'm trying to just decide like what I do, like what stages I do this in, because my gaps everywhere are actually really, really good. And I'm very impressed with like how good I was able to do them with so little butt joints and like in corners. Like it's quite good, because what I read you usually do is like a pre-mudding stage to fill all of these gaps, but they're like, this is the widest gap, and it's like 1/4 of an inch. There's like nowhere else anywhere in here that has that. So I'm like, do I even need to do that? Or just should I do it and take my time? And I can't decide if I want to do that. Or what I could do is use the big stretch caulk that I have and go around all of the joists, which I could do also. Or I could just start mudding all of the L trims that I did. That's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so next up, what I'm gonna do, thanks for coming with me on my journey. I'm not ready to start taping yet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go around and pre-mud all of my corners. I'm gonna pre-mud this one butt joint that I have, so it's like a smoother surface to start with. I'm going to do the first round of mudding on all of the L joints. And I guess I should go around and just do mudding on all of the screws as a first round too. And I'll do it also like a pre-mudding on any of the places where I had to do like a little bit of patchwork. 24 hours later, I can come back, sand, do my next coat. I'll probably finish with caulking last. I've never done this before, so I'm just sort of figuring it as I go, and I don't think there's one right way to do it. So I appreciate you guys just listening to my process. Let's do some mudding. There's a million ways to mud. I'm not even gonna begin to go into all of them. There's hot mud, there's different setting times, there's joint compounds, whatever, I don't care. I bought this stuff. It's pre-mixed. I read if you are doing taping to avoid swelling, you might wanna like water it down a little bit, but we're not doing that right now. So literally I'm just gonna get my drywalling trowel, put some of this crap in here, get my various types of putty knives, spreading knives, whatever, and I'm just gonna go for it. We'll see how it goes. I don't think I need to tape off anything. The other point to pre-mudding,
which I'm trying to find an example here, but actually I didn't really have much here. I'm gonna spin you around. So this joint right here has some cracking. Technically when you pre-mud, you wanna like knock that part out because it's damaged and fill it back in with compound, because then you can go back and sand it, make it straight and it's solid and all that kind of stuff. However, the only places, do I have anywhere? There are no joints, I think I checked all of these, anywhere where those aren't going to eventually be covered up by baseboards, trim within a window or a door, or molding that goes around those things. So I'm like not even gonna bother with that either. Let's just have some fun. Let's like make this fun. Just for a quick descriptor, this is all-purpose joint compound. It can be used for all coats in the reinforcing and concealing of joints. In wallboard construction, it can be used for taping, finishing, fastener concealment, filling corner bead, and texturing. Doesn't say anything about working time. One other tip that I got is, I'm trying to find one, although I did a pretty good job with these screws, is if you are putting the compound over your screws and you're finding that they protrude too much, oh, here's a good one. So this screw right here, if I mud over it, it's sticking out a little bit too much. Get my screwdriver. I was told just take your screwdriver and do a quarter turn, if possible. Okay, I might need to use two hands to do it, but 1/4 turn, that will recess or like dimple it in, and that way the compound can just go over it so that, you know, it's more recessed in. You go, so. I'm gonna do my first LB strip here, so I'm just gonna nice clean paddle. Just go all the way. It's kind of nice because that strip at the top sort of, you know, protects the wood. I don't have to tape off anything. Just get all this off. It's kind of tricky because I'm a perfectionist. But I think, because we're going to do multiple coats of this, that's totally fine. I just finished doing all of the non-joint mudding. So all of the screws that are not going to have tape that go over them have been mudded with a first coat. So that includes all of the L strips that I did and around, and I'm hoping I can just sand off. I'm gonna end up like doing a nice cleanup of all the wood up top, and other way. Did it up here too. Definitely doing the extra pieces under here is making a big difference. And then I did like the pre-mudding on a couple of places, like right here at my only butt joint, just to start filling that in, and I ended up getting rid of some chipped away pieces and just all of the areas that don't require tape, at least right away, or I can kind of do this in pieces. It's gonna have to be in pieces anyways. And I filled in that corner because that was the only corner that had kind of like a big gap. Everything else is like ready to go. So now that I'm here, I'm gonna do taping, which I know is gonna be like a little bit of a different task. So here we go. I'm gonna start on a very easy, simple wall for me. Never done this before. The tips that I read for this are, if you are using pre-mixed joint compound, so not hot mud, a lot of times what happens is you will put your tape on and mud your joint, and then come back 24 hours later and there are blisters. I think it's called swelling, or maybe it's called blistering. I think it's called blistering. And just for what it's worth, I'm gonna put a video in the description that is like a 2-hour video that goes through every possible step for drywalling, and it's incredibly helpful. And this is where I got all my information from. So I'm just giving you a couple of tips because they're applicable to my situation. But when that happens, it's because you don't get enough mud underneath the tape. So there's not enough moisture in there to swell and absorb the tape and wet the tape, and that tape then delaminates from the wall. So there's two ways to combat that. You can add more water to your compound for this first one, or you can just make sure that your coverage for mud underneath it is enough so that if you were to peel off the tape, the entire piece of tape would be covered with mud. So I'm just gonna overuse the compound underneath, because what's going to eventually happen is we'll stick on the tape and we will squeeze out the mud behind it just so that it ends up like running flat here, to the point where you're better to over coverage and use more compound, because compound is really cheap. Like each of these bins that I got, or like a 5-gallon bin, is like 20 bucks. So there's no reason to be overly conservative with your joint compound. So I'm also switching to a slightly smaller knife. So again, I'm just gonna do this wall live, not make it too long, and just kind of go through the motions and see how it works. So I've seen a tip that was basically like, you can put more mud on by going sideways like this, so that you're not kind of scraping everything off when you do it. Need it too. So that feels like a good amount. Point here isn't to scrape off everything I just put on. What I read was get a clean version of your trowel and just depress it lightly and just kind of butter, as if you're like buttering toast down the wall. That looks, I don't know, that looks like pretty good coverage. I see some areas that aren't great. So I'm gonna mud up this entire wall real quick, and then I'll come back when I'm done. And take tape. Tape needs to go all the way up to here. Going to unroll it a bit. Make sure I'm actually putting this properly on the joint. Actually gonna tear it right there so that I can move this starting piece over a little bit. Again, I know I'm not gonna be perfect at this. What I wanna make sure I'm doing is just getting the tape nice and gooey behind and stuck to it, and making sure that I'm smoothing out as any of the sort of ridges behind it, like these bumps, which again, not a big deal. Now I'm not gonna pull this off because I think I did a really good job, but if I were to pull this off, I would wanna make sure that my tape had joint compound pulling off all of it with it, because that would mean that there was significant coverage behind it. All right, I think that's good. So now I'm just gonna take more mud and I'm going to lightly go over it. Again, I'm not like building up a huge significant amount here. I'm actually gonna, you know, for this, I'm gonna switch to the wider one. With any of these joints that are the rounded corners, remember there's a depression in between these joints, so you're really actually kind of taking compound and filling that empty space with it. And that's what's gonna bring it up, all the walls up to like the same level. Remember, this is just also round one. We're gonna have sanding, another coat. I heard there's something called a flood coat. I'm excited to desktop research what that is more tonight. All right, I'm gonna finish up this wall. I'm gonna repeat everything I did around to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this was 5. There's only 5 joints overall in this. God, I love working in a tiny space. Then I'm gonna do the corners. I'll go through the corners, just a couple other tips and tricks I read, but it's basically the exact same thing as this. I'm sure it's just slightly more complicated. I'm assuming most people who are somewhat familiar with drywall know this, but drywall has a crease in it, so you can fold it perfectly for corners. The other thing is this angle right at the tip is 90 degrees, so if you can get nice and in that corner, you're gonna get a good smoothing process, versus if you're kind of here, it's gonna elevate and not go as well. At least is what I read. I've been keeping it in this corner. It seems to be going well. Hi, baby. How you doing? Can I come in? You can come in. But Daddy's gonna finish this thing right now, okay? So you can't pick you up. Got round one of everything mudded, all of the joints taped off, all of the tops taped off. Gonna let it dry for 24 hours and come back and sand. Really, really happy with how it came out. I think between filming and learning and doing research kind of in between things to make sure I was doing it right, that took like 3.5 hours. So tiny rooms, not that hard to drywall. All right, day 2. It's been 24 hours. I'm going around looking at all of the tape joints. Everything seems to be good. No like delaminations or anything. So I'm just gonna do some sanding. I'm not gonna bore you with it. I read like you don't really have to sand between coats. What you're really trying to do is just knock down any high points, and you can do that either with a scraper. So like right here, I can just kind of scrape off that high point, or right here, or you can use a sanding block, which I'll probably do a mixture of both. I think mainly up here in these places. Then I'm gonna move on to doing my second coat with the joint mix, and we'll talk about that when I get to it. All right, that wasn't too bad. We're gonna move on to coat number 2. Again, million different things I read about this. Some people with their hot mud talk about thinning it. Joint compound, I read you don't need to thin it. It's just on the second coat you wanna use a wider broad knife, I think is what they're called. So I have, I think a 10-inch one and a 12-inch one. I'm just gonna see which one is easier to use. I am going to thin my joint compound just a little bit, like nothing crazy. I don't want it to be like liquidy, but just something that I think is just a little bit easier to work with. The other thing is I'm gonna just be strategic about this next coat. So yesterday when I was trying to be very thorough, I was overdoing it in terms of places that I just know are gonna be covered up with trim or molding or any of that kind of stuff. I'm just not even gonna worry about those places this time because it's just a waste of mud and it's a waste of my time. So the main focus is gonna be these joints up here, all of the corners, all of the seams, and then anywhere that I did patchwork, like here. And I think this will go a lot quicker because I'm not doing any more taping. I'm using a bigger trowel. And really this step is about filling the space a little bit more and creating larger, smoother edges over the run of things so that all the walls can be somewhat brought up to being flat. I read that like some people don't even do a third coat. I'm very curious to see how this goes for this space. And I'm just very curious, like, oh, am I gonna even have to do a third coat? But let's start with the second one. A little bit of water with the joint compound. I'm gonna mix it in the trowel because I obviously don't wanna just add water to a full new bucket of the joint compound, which by the way, sands really easily with just like a 120 grit sanding block. Let's get to it. All right, drywall and mudding, not that hard. Drywall and mudding well, hard. So I got second coat done on everything, and to be honest, I think it looks really good. It might look really messy on camera, but for a total new beginner following directions, I think it's pretty dang good. All of the tape joints, they look really good. Everything is smooth and feathered. These big kind of gaps that needed to be filled, I'm just quite happy with how it all came together. Sanding this was super easy. So I'm gonna do another round of sanding tomorrow once this all cures, and then decide like what the third coat really is and how to go about it. And if it's like a really thin top coat, if it's a flood coat, which I read about. So you'd see that L trim really disappears on that second coat. So overall, another good, easy day with the drywalling. Gonna be moving on to coat number 3. So as best as possible, I'm gonna be using, this is a 10-inch broad knife. This is 12-inch. So the key for doing this last top coat is really trying to thinly spread and really flatten out as much of the gaps as possible. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm also using another joint compound. This one, it's the same brand as the one before, except this one is specifically for top coats. It comes in a much bigger size. This is the 3.5 gallon ones versus that's 2 quarts, I think, but this thing was like 12 bucks. And so I don't have any use for it after this, so I'll probably overuse it. But I'm really just trying to finish smoothing out all of the joints and cover up all the places, because then I want to move on to painting after this. So I don't want to spend too much time going into all the specifics on this last coat, but the key thing that we're aiming for on this is a broad overall coat that creates the most seamless transition between all of the joints. I'm not sure how well this is going to show on camera, but this down here is a manufacturer's joint. And if I put my piece underneath here, it's probably not going to show super well, but if I get really close, you can see there's just like the smallest of gaps there, meaning overall I need to just, based on all of the joints, fill that final gap so that this is as smooth as possible. And I'm sure if I went around, let's see, to this joint right here, actually that one looks really, really good overall. I'm sorry if this isn't translating to camera very well. Here's another one, let's see how that looks. That's pretty good too. So that is the current plan. All right, again, not an expert here, so everything I read was, you know, don't need to be conservative with this top coat. So what I'm gonna do is just pull from the bottom up, do this nice overall, oh, that's already messy. I'm gonna fill in that space as best as possible. I'm pressing somewhat hard, but overall I'm just filling in this middle gap here. This top coat is thinner than that joint one, so already I can tell it's a little bit easier to spread out. It's also a different color, which is actually making this already easier just to see where I've spread this on. So I've got middle spread, then I'm just gonna go one over, dropping compound pretty much everywhere. One on the outside here, flinging that everywhere. I'm terrible at this. It's good to see a beginner doing a terrible job, right? And then I'm gonna do one on the outside here. Again, just pressure all the way down. Get as much of an even coat as possible down the middle. So far, I would not advise using this trowel, or not this trowel, this broad knife. Okay, now that I've got this spread, this isn't perfect, but essentially what I'm going to do, let me clean off my knife, is essentially, again, I'm trying to spread wide in the middle here to fill this gap. So I'm going to try to feather the edge, feather this edge. I'm pushing harder this way, but really I'm just kind of running it along the wall here, not taking away the compound in the middle here, similar to what I've done before, but just feathering a little bit more. Put all that compound back, and then technically one smooth, not trying to scrape it off, just trying to, you know, flatten the middle as best I can. It's actually really, really good. Okay, I just did all of that live. It's gonna be really boring to see me do that in more detail, but I'm essentially just gonna do that whole thing again right here and try to smooth all of this out. I'll come back to you once I have it done. All right, I am done. I don't ever want to drywall mud again. I think it looks pretty good. I'm gonna say it one more time, then we can paint. I'm gonna do my final round of sanding. I've already started, and what I've realized is that although the top coating version of the compound I used wasn't the easiest to work with, it sands really, really easy, so I'm not putting a lot of pressure, just very light sanding, and it's coming out very smooth. The other thing that I'm gonna do, and it's gonna be hard to sort of show this, is it was very difficult to do really precise mudding up against those joints, so I'm just gonna take a little razor blade and get up there and cut away those pieces and do a little bit of light sanding as well, because eventually after I paint, I'm gonna go back and caulk all of those, so they will be pretty clean looking transitions overall, but those are the last two steps I'm gonna do before I can paint. I've never had the pleasure of painting new construction where I don't have to go all the way to the ends of things. I don't really have to tape anything off because it's the bare floor. So I think the only tricky part is just gonna be painting around the rafters. As usual, that's been the complicated part of this, but Got my ultra white paint. I'm very undecided as to what the like overall ultimate aesthetic of this place will be. Like right now, I like the wood ceilings. I like white walls. It's gonna be light, beachy, beach house vibes in here. Sometime down the road, I'll probably change that, but for now, just really excited to get some paint on. Two coats of paint all done. Think it looks awesome. I'm really excited actually just to like trim out the windows and the doors. I think that really is going to tie it together. Same with like the baseboards. I have an idea to just complete the beams up here, so I'll take you through that step. Overall, I think it looks great. Next step is going to be cleaning up all of these joints. So again, these are peel away, so we can get up there and we can peel off the hard edge of all these things. I'm sure they're not going to look perfect. I'm then going to use some big stretch white caulk, and I'm just going to flush up every single joist to drywall piece. And I think that will look really good, but I'm waiting for the paint to dry. But overall, like, pretty happy. It's very clear that I am an amateur drywaller who missed a ton of things, but at this point, I'm the only one who can see the mistakes. All right, so one detail that I struggled with a little bit, it's like a detail that I hadn't figured out yet, and then it came to me like as I was doing the finishing of the drywall and the painting, was how to deal with, it's kind of hard to see, this joint up here where the drywall on the angles on the sides meet the shiplap. Ultimately what I realized is because it's basically like a piece of trim, is I could take just a clean 2x4 and rip it in half, and it becomes like a piece of trim that will match the joists up here that are exposed, and then I can just place it up against here, brad nail it in place, and then caulk the seam, and it'll look like a really clean joint overall. So I took a nice 2x4 that I could find, I ripped it in half. Alexa, turn on the vacuum. I planed it down on both sides and I sanded it. And then I marked out this angle up here and translated it to angle on my miter saw, and I went back and forth a couple of times just to get like a really tight fit on both sides. And now I can just lift it up in place and secure it on both sides. Looks pretty good. Once that piece is in place, we can go around, we can peel all of the L bead off, and we can use some caulk to then finish the seams, and I think it's gonna look really good. It's gonna kind of like tie everything together. I'll be very excited to be done with this whole process because it's definitely been one of the most tricky ones to figure out for this build. I'm gonna start pulling off these strips. Let's just see how clean these look. I have a feeling there's gonna be more touch-ups than just simple caulking, but we'll see. It's kind of hard to get off. Just gotta break the end and then let's see. That's about what I expected. Let me see if I can get really close. So you can see, it's definitely gonna need some cleaning up, but I think between cleaning it up, some caulk, and then touch-up paints, it's gonna come out good. I'm gonna peel the rest of these off. I'm also just wondering, like, did I build up too much joint compound on them and there's some buildup there? I don't know. I don't know how I would have done it differently. Those strips peeled away pretty well. I'm gonna get up there. I've got a sanding block and I've also got some 120 grit paper, and I'm just gonna clean up the rough edges for it on basically all of them, so that then I have kind of the flattest edge to create the caulked joint between. And then I think after I do that, I'll probably go back and do one more round of touch up with paint up there. This is where it's just like a bunch of boring finishing details, so I'm probably not gonna show a lot of it. I'll just show you the after. Also, I hate this stool. It is so freaking loud. This combo works really well. So I've got this whole side cleaned up in terms of peel stripped away. I sanded down sort of like the excess caulk, I think, as best as possible. I'm sorry, the excess joint compound that was kind of up against the ridge that's been created. I truly don't know how this is gonna go. So I've got this product called Big Stretch, which is just a type of caulk that can span, I believe it can expand up to 500% its original size. It's paintable. It comes in 12 colors. This one is white. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna pick one of these and test doing the caulking in between. That'll tell me if this is like easy to work with, if I need to tape off something, if I need to have like a brush or like something wet to kind of wipe off the excess. Because what I'll do is I'll caulk it, and then if that's good to go, I'll do all of them, and then I can come back and do one last round of touch-up painting for it. So let's see how this goes. That was a little bit trickier than I anticipated. I think I learned a little bit. I need to up the overall speed on that electric caulker. To be honest, the electric one might not be the right tool for this, but I got this one done. Actually looks pretty good. I figured out that using this little foam brush just to smooth out some of the excess and then having like a wet paper towel to do it. I'm gonna go around and finish it. I don't even think taping anything off is gonna really do anything because there's not really a great surface for tape to stick to because of where the shiplap is. And I think I can get it off with this and a wet cloth. So I'm gonna test out one more right now. That was a lot easier. What I'm realizing is the gun's hitting the next post and causing a little bit of trouble, so I just gotta go a little bit more vertically. But that was a lot better. All right, finished all of the detailing and the painting, so I'm gonna call that step done. So I just wanna quickly touch on it, and what I'm realizing, and I brought it up before either in a previous video or earlier in this video, is that ultimately putting those hurricane ties up made everything more complicated. They should be there, but putting them where I did has made it more complicated. It made hanging the drywall more complicated because I had to cut around them. It made mudding around them more complicated because I couldn't use that L bead everywhere. And ideally what I should have done is, with the gift of hindsight, I should have removed all of the hurricane ties that I had put up, moved them to the outside so that the interior of this place would be just the joints. It's the only thing you see. I could have been a lot more liberal about my cutouts for the drywall. I could have used L bead everywhere. It would have been a lot easier to mask and tape off. I am not kidding when I say that I think I spent probably 8 total hours detailing everything around these joints. So that included more spackling, more caulking, smoothing all that out, removing excess, painting, taping, painting again, cleanup and sanding. Like, I just made that process so much more difficult for myself. However, it's really important to me that that looks good. And while I'm pretty much at this point never going to be able to do anything about the hurricane ties that I can see, although you actually can't see them from this angle, and I think it looks really good. It's just something I'm gonna have to deal with, and I do think it came out really, really good. I will take you up there just so you could see. It is not perfect. It's reflective of my skill set, and it's reflective of a lot of hard work and planning put into it. Just not quite enough planning, but we are wrapped on that. I can go around, I can install like fixtures, although I think I'm gonna need to order some oversized fixture plates because my cutouts aren't great. I spent some time sweeping and vacuuming up, and now we are ready to move on to installing laminate floorings, which I'm really excited about. I think like that's like a big final piece of this place, sort of to tie everything together. All right, so that is gonna wrap it up for this episode. If you have any questions about this project, materials, process, some stumblings that I went through, or you just want to generally understand where I got some of my information from so that you can combine it with this video and do your own research, please feel free to leave a comment, and like always, I would be more than happy to respond and give you as much information as I can. Now, if you are watching these in real time, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so that you can be around and be notified when the next video in this series comes out. If you are watching these later on, I will have a playlist linked to every video that is launched right here, as well as the next episode in the series right here. I'll see you guys next time on whatever it is that I'm building. Bye.